Ah, the worst Gen 3 starter. Trico is somewhat of an awkward little critter. In both its artwork and model, it just kind of comes across as this lanky little humanoid weirdo whose proportions look uncannily like a child in a gecko costume. The lumpy fingers, cleft chin head, and weird tail just don't really look good. Grovyle improves a lot upon this, adopting a much more lizard-like body plan and using the natural curvature of the long leaf to give the design a genuine sense of agility and sleekness, which is well aided by those sharp leaves on its arms that imply either that maybe this creature can glide or something, or that it can use them like blades to cut with. Either way it works. Which then gets ruined somewhat by Sceptile with its Christmas tree tail and weird nutrient orb stuck to its back. It's a very unbalanced bottom-heavy design visually, and it doesn't look any more powerful for it, which really kind of sucks for a third stage evolution. Mega Sceptile manages to reclaim a little ground by leaning into this over-design, absolutely piling on details until it looks cool. It does succeed reclaiming some sense of power and danger, but at the cost of also looking even more like a Christmas tree. According to Did You Know Gaming, Torchic was based on the rather bleak Japanese tradition of painted chicks, chickens painted with bright colors which are bought for children at festivals and then thrown away or killed once the child gets bored of them or the chick grows up past its cute phase. Yikes. But this does reflect in the line a little bit, because after the supreme adorableness of Torchic, like just the cutest, Combuskin is inarguably a penis. I'm sorry, that's just the shape that it is, there's no way around it. Combined with the angry face and the rather brutal claws, yeah, safe to say that the cute face is over by stage 2. Which leaves us with Blaziken, and please don't make me have to get the spray bottle out for this one. Although it's meant to be based on a fighting rooster, it barely looks like that at all with its humanoid proportions and long legs. This design is all about the fighting and not about the bird. But I can't deny that it works. Blaziken is sleek and it looks cool and powerful as hell, especially that almost dragon-like crest on its face. Mega Blaziken brings a little bit more of the bird vibe back, but beyond that is actually a fairly conservative mega form. It avoids the kaiju cheesiness that other megas suffer from, and thus I like it. I heard you like Mudkips? Me too! Mudkip is an adorable little friend, occupying a perfect synthesis point between a fish and an amphibian. There's a bit of salamander, a bit of mudskipper, and just a little bit of frog in that big mouth in its design. Marshtomp takes that and veers off in a little bit of a different direction, with it darkening the color scheme and getting a little bit more creepy, with those round staring eyes and upright mom says it's my turn on the Xbox posture. Swampert, after that, then gets back on all fours, gets a little bit more animalistic, and accents itself with fins that give it a real sense of agility, like this thing could dart through the swampy mud at some real speed to catch prey, it looks like. And it does look really predatorial with its hunched over pose and sharp, toothy mouth shape. It's a really solid third evolution for the line, and it feels like it really brings home a lot of the stuff that Mudkip was setting up back in stage 1. Mega Swampert, meanwhile, mega is the right word. It is swole in the sense of swollen, and I just can't take it seriously. It looks like if Popeye was a wrestler with an animal gimmick, it looks like Mudkip's JoJo stand. I wouldn't want to get punched by one, for sure, but it mostly just looks inflated and rather silly. Poochyena is such a good pup, with its round snout and gregarious little mouth with awkward teeth and that ruffled patch of frizzy fur on its butt. It has so much of that teething puppy that hasn't learned manners yet energy. Like, this little bastard will grab onto a toy and refuse to ever learn the command to let go. You'll come home from work and find half of your socks chewed to pieces on the floor. That's what Poochyena looks like. Might-Hyena, then, is what would happen if that scrappy little puppy grew up to be an angry goth with a werewolf persona. To me, at least, the markings around the eyes and the pronounced dark edges on the upper eyelid always brought to mind the idea of makeup, which, along with the shinier and sleeker fur, gives it a more put-together and controlled look. This is then contrasted with the snarl on its lips and the sharp claws, which keeps it looking dangerous. It's a really well-put-together evolution line that they've got. It's got a strong concept, and it follows it through very cleanly, although I do wish they'd give it a more exciting regional form at some point. Like, surely there's another 2 or 3 things you could do with the concept of a goth hyena. Zigzagoon is boring. I think that's pretty fair to say. Its design is entirely based around these triangular spikes that are supposed to make it look frizzy, but mostly they just make it look like a pine cone. Minun is a solid evolution of that idea, keeping a few spikes while smoothing out the rest to make it look more serious and agile. It works, but especially with that muted brown color palette, it's just really boring to look at. Galarian Zigzagoon, on the other hand, damn, this kid wants to party. The simple swap to a much more dramatic and contrasting color scheme helps the design a lot, and Galarian Linoon, far from looking serious and boring like the base form, gets a ton of mischievous energy from its new fur and that tongue hanging out the mouth. And then there's Obstagoon, a Pokemon that just really wants to rock and roll all night. Part punk and part glam rocker, it looks dramatic and intimidating, further aided by its distinctive cross-armed pose, really looking like both an obstruction and like a goon. I can't stress how much I love this tongue-flapping dumbass. It's the biggest glow-up in Galar, and I'm so happy that Zigzagoon finally got to be interesting. Wurmple has a butt for a face, which on the one hand is kind of funny, but on the other hand, caterpillars are weird little creatures. It instinctively makes sense that its head would look like that. And it's a weirdness that persists into the rest of it, with all the scrungly little bits and spikes and bumps all over it. Silcoon and Cascoon are functionally the exact same design with tiny differences, but the real diversity comes from Beautifly and Dustox, which are almost polar opposites. Beautifly is adorable and rather humanoid, looking almost like a chibi alien with a long snout and colorful, daintily shaped wings. It is designed almost entirely for, as the name implies, visual appeal. Dustox, on the other hand, is this freaky little flying pillbug missile with compound eyes and maggot limbs, whose ragged wings are sharp and almost look like they could cut you. It looks alien and off-putting, pushing the cutesy Pokemon style as far into creepy insect territory as it possibly can. And honestly, fair play to this evolution line for that. I do love that you can get either an adorable vision of beauty or a total horror show entirely at random, depending on a hidden stat that the game refuses to tell you. That's bold, and that's something that makes Pokemon fun. What do you get when you mix a Japanese yokai with a lily pad with Mexican folk costume? Well, you get something akin to the Lotad line. And it starts simple enough, with Lotad being little more than a weird tadpole creature with a lily pad on its head. Slightly cute, slightly weird with those pinprick eyes, but ultimately nothing to really write home about. Lumbra then explores the kappa aspect of the design, that beaked humanoid Japanese folklore creature associated with water. Its despondent expression is an odd contrast to the otherwise cheerful coloring of the design, but that does make it a little bit more memorable. You're not likely to forget an expression like that right away. Ludicolo then becomes very cheerful indeed, with its happy little dance moves, its sort of sombrero leaf hat, and its fur that's kinda like a poncho? It all creates a truly bizarre creature whose peculiar influences almost defy easy description. Like, are the black markings on its limbs like seeds in the flesh of a fruit? Is that a pineapple on its head? I don't know that I like this evolution line very much, but I will give Pokemon credit that I have never seen anything else like it in any other game. I've always kind of had a soft spot for Seedot. As a design is little more than an acorn with some eye-like markings and feet, but there's something adorably sincere and determined about it. It reminds me of the metals from Mega Man, small and not that strong, but nonetheless they carry on. I don't, however, have a lot of fondness for what it evolves into. It starts okay with Nuzleaf, which seems a natural evolution of the first idea. It's an acorn that has sprouted a leaf and started to grow a body. That makes sense, and it gives it a real kid who's determined to grow up fast kind of energy that I do like. Shiftry, on the other hand, is just ugly, and to be fair, it is kind of supposed to be. It's based on the Tengu, which is a Japanese folklore monster, and the Pokédex does cast it as this terrifying, wrathful forest guardian, blowing people away with his leaf fans. So it makes conceptual sense for it to look this way, but I just don't think the design follows on very well from Seedot and Nuzleaf. It takes a really hard turn towards a very different kind of design appeal, and in doing so, it loses me. And let's hear it for Hoenn Pidgey, everyone. It's the mandatory normal flying type. It's a good one, though. Taillow closely mimics the body shape of a swallow, but it mixes that with the weird, wide face and huge bug eyes of a frog mouth. It accents that with a prominent red crest on the front that contrasts nicely with the muted blue of its wings, which makes for a simple but really distinct little design. There's a real sense of believability about this bird, at least to me. Swallow naturally evolves on that by lengthening and sharpening its facial features to be more akin to a kite. That's the bird kind of kite, not the toy. And it sharpens up the wings and tails, and especially the colored markings, which now form an arrow-like shape along its chest that really emphasize the idea of speed and agility in this creature. If you tell me that this thing can make a 90-degree turn at 80 miles per hour in the air, I'm inclined to believe you. It does look like that kind of a bird. I mostly remember Wingull as the Zubat of the Sea in Gen 3, as a repetitive and annoying encounter while surfing. But, removed from that context, it is genuinely such a charming little thing. Its design plays a lot with proportion. The body is scarcely more than a ping-pong ball blob, the beak is almost as long as the body itself, and its wings are elongated and slightly stretched looking, which all contributes to a peculiar form of mascot adorableness, stemming in part from the long vertical eyes and cat ear-like protrusions from its head. It's a genuinely brilliant stylization of the idea of a seagull, I think. Pelipper keeps playing with proportionality in that same way, making the beak into over half of the entire body, moving it from a sleek little seagull arrow to this awkward bobbing flying football of a thing, with its curious hammer-shaped head and its feet with no visible legs. Its eyes are also peculiar, with a straight line running right through them that gives it a rather uncanny gaze, slightly unnerving, although, in my opinion, not really in a creepy way, just in a peculiar way. Whatever else you can say about the Wingull line, it is interesting in its shape language. Okay, let's talk about Ralts and its male form, specifically. Ralts is interesting in that it seems to be a Pokemon designed to communicate the idea of shyness and faint-hearted uncertainty. The long white robe, the bowl-cut hairpiece, it's all stuff that on a human character design would develop those ideas. And it combines this elegantly with its psychic powers, literally mental sensitivity to other people, which is also emphasized in its Pokédex entries. Kirlia, then, represents a growth stage, a finding of the self, as it were, now showing its eye and breaking out of the obscuring white robe. And that culminates with Gallade, who in both its Mega and base forms sharpen into an almost tokusatsu-like sort of hero figure, a fully self-realized gallant protector whose sensitivity helps it find vulnerable souls to defend. And in that, it makes a perfect companion for Wally, whose in-game story is about this journey of self-actualization and finding your strength as a person. I personally never liked Gallade as much as I like Gardevoir, but as storytelling, it does make for a pretty strong little design. Okay, let's talk about Ralts and its female form. And please don't make me have to get the spray bottle out for this. Ralts as a design is interesting through a gender lens, because it starts out quite genderless, just this ungendered child figure, which then takes on a somewhat feminine aspect with Kirlia, which then either vanishes into Gallade or blooms fully into Gardevoir, with its long flowing dress and sleek, slender curves. Like a Gallade, Gardevoir is a resolution to Ralts and Kirlia's themes of sensitivity and empathy and attention to other people's feelings, but where Gallade becomes a gallant defender, a very stereotypically masculine sort of thing, Gardevoir aspires to the idea of a nurturing protector, a motherly figure almost, or a universal big sister. It's all very gender stereotypical, and I rather wish that Gallade wasn't gender-locked for that specific reason. It's more than a little old-fashioned in that way. I think it's really cool that Gardevoir can also be male. It's a really nice part of the storytelling that anyone can inhabit this kind of caring. Mega Gardevoir is just also one of the prettiest mega forms in the franchise, with its ballroom gown dress and that face crest almost like jewelry, a picture of elegance. As a kid, I always had a lot of affinity for water striders. Seeing them skate around in puddles, gliding over the surface of the water, was fascinating and kind of magical back when I didn't know how surface tension works. Surskit, though, is an extremely simple interpretation of those bugs. Basically just a Moai blob with 4 leg stalks and cutesy eyes. I've talked before about how Pokemon stylizes bugs to make them appealing, but this is maybe taking that a little bit too far. I kinda wish it had some bug features left in the anatomy. And Masquerain seems to have heard that complaint, because that Pokemon draws on all kinds of insects for its look. Eye spot mimicry as a natural defense, dragonfly-like fluttering wings, a body that to me kind of evokes a caterpillar or an aquatic nymph of some insect. It makes for a design that's certainly interesting and cool to look at, I suppose, but it also feels rather directionless, more like a semi-random collection of traits than anything working towards a cohesive vision. It's not bad as such, it's just rather indistinct and forgettable, at least to me. I love Shroomish's little grumpy face. Along with the round body and dull color scheme, it really has that near-perfect just-a-little-guy energy. Like, you'd lift some leaves in the forest and you'd see it there and it would look at you and go kind of like, meh, and then you'd be like, oh, sorry to disturb you, and put back the leaves. Like, it's that kind of critter, right? And it is the squat round body with just a pair of stubby legs under it that does that for it. There's so much charm in that simplicity. Breloom, on the other hand, well, talk about an escalation in complexity. It takes on much more of a bird-like aspect, mixed with the mushroom structure of its head and tail. That definitely makes it unique. A bipedal mushroom bird, that's just a cool combination of ideas, and it has a sort of fun, inquisitive energy to it. It seems like a curious critter, something that might peck you if you startle it, but always comes back for a second look because it just can't help itself. Why its Pokédex entries insist that it's a pro-level boxer that loves to punch things, though, I'll never really understand. The design does not communicate that at all. It's well-known trivia at this point that the Slakoth line tells a story. It's a lazy homebody who decides to get off their ass and really put in hard work and effort, but then ultimately decides that the stress wasn't worth it and goes back to being lazy. The line is obviously based around sloths, and Slakoth has a sort of dopey, adorably oblivious energy. Like, this Pokemon isn't lazy on purpose, it's just sort of naturally low on energy, which I quite like. Vigoroth then brings in almost a sort of baboon-like quality with its bright facial protrusion and red posterior and aggression, and the white and red color scheme really helps it look alive and vital. Which all resolves into Slacking, and where Slakoth had a dopey, innocent look, Slacking feels much more defiant in its laziness. Its casual pose and hard stare almost dares you to try and make it do anything. It's got some real stubborn old bastard energy. And design-wise, it takes much more after a gorilla than a sloth at this point, which also works for it. Sloths are lazy by nature, gorillas are lazy because nobody tells a gorilla to do shit, or it will beat you to death with your own arms. Much like Slacking will, that Pokemon has base stats for days. Nincada is really boring. It's based on a cicada nymph, and while it's highly stylized, as all bug Pokemon are, it almost refuses to be interesting in any way with its dull color scheme and lack of interesting anatomy. And that seems to be intentional to establish a strong contrast with its evolution Ninjask, which with its bright wings and red and gold black color scheme is quite flashy indeed. It resembles almost a tokusatsu version of a ninja with that helmet-like mask on its face, but it does retain plausibility as an insect. Like, it's a bit outlandish, but it still looks like a bug that could be real. But then there's Shedinja, based on the discarded husk of a molting cicada. It's a gimmick Pokemon that can only ever have 1 HP, but has amazingly powerful defensive abilities to make up for it. And with its geometric wings and halo, it almost brings to mind the idea of a guardian angel, perhaps? Or maybe the ghostly departed soul of the dead past self of the Ninjask that crawled out of it. Where Nincada and Ninjask are fairly standard Pokemon bugs and nothing to write home about, Shedinja really does do something to elevate the line with weirdness and a really genuinely kind of creepy vibe. Whismur is a cute little egg with its weird crosshair eyes and permanently distressed mouth shape and scared posture. It's a timid little rabbit-like creature, forever startled by loud noises and liable to cry about it. It's adorable, if a little uncanny, with those eyes, and nothing about that design prepares you at all for Loudred, which is seemingly designed to be as opposite to Whismur as humanly possible. It tells a story, I guess, kinda, of a tiny timid crybaby which learns to find its voice and respond to noise by simply overpowering it, but good God, this thing is ugly. On purpose, clearly, but between the giant mouth and bizarro alien Mickey Mouse ears and stubby body, there's not a lot of visual appeal left in this thing, nor coherency. It seems kind of a messy design, frankly. It resolves into Exploud, which with its hard geometric body shapes and facial crest takes on almost a little bit of an aspect of a dragon or a fringed lizard, which does make it look a little bit more cool, albeit that giant cavernous hollering mouth is still a face that only a mother could love. I don't think the jump from Whismur to Loudred really works design-wise, but the line is unique at least. Man, Makuhita is so freaking cute. It has this soft little trash bag body and punching glove hands, and combine that with the permanently smiling expression and the little circles on its face like ruddy cheeks, and you really get the sense of some adorably precocious kid who's just started learning a martial art, who's just super into it, like he wants to learn all the punches and stuff. The roundness and the softness really works for it in that sense too, rather than defaulting to that classic sculpted bodybuilder hardness that a lot of martial arts designs tend to go for. Hariyama, by contrast, gets a lot more geometric in its design, especially with those giant flat hands and the skirt around its waist. It looks like a decidedly harder Pokemon, but retains the rounded shape language in its body, especially in the legs. And while it definitely draws from sumo wrestlers with the idea of open palm slaps and large-bodied pushing power, I also think it has a bit of a wrestler energy going on. That bright blue and yellow almost comes across like a spandex or a costume of some sort. Outlandish though it looks though, I think it does work. It really does feel like this is the kind of fighter that an adorable kid like Makuhita would grow up into. Nosepass is a Moai, which is an ancient statue found on Rapa Nui in eastern Polynesia. Those statues are intensely fascinating and the subject of several ancient aliens conspiracy theories, but for this short, it is enough to know that all of the angular stylized humanoid facial design of these Pokemon is lifted directly from the Moai statues, with the nose highlighted in red to give the design more visual variety than the mono-colored stone originals. They are essentially a chibi version of a Moai, and it's really hard not to find them charming, I feel. Probopass, the evolution, is based on a variant of the Moai statues, which is wearing a Poochyena, which is a stylized top knot. To the best of my knowledge, the indigenous cultures of Rapa Nui believed that hair stored your mana, your power, and hence the top knot is a signifier of that power, so it makes sense for that to be one of the markers of the more powerful evolution, I suppose. The mustache, meanwhile, it's iron sand attracted by its magnetic powers, at least according to the Pokedex, but along with the eyes that poke out from the shadow underneath the top knot, visually it makes it look like Nosepass is wearing those fake gag disguise glasses you see in cartoons, which makes it quite lighthearted and, I must admit, kinda charming. Skitty is one of those Pokemon that feels so much like it should have been grandfathered into the fairy type along with Jigglypuff, Meryl, and Snubbull, but for some reason it never was. It takes the form of two orbs squished onto one another. The top orb has ears and a kitty cat face drawn on it, and the bottom orb has little nubs for legs, finished off with whatever that tail is supposed to be, a pinholder, foxgrass? Its design is testament to how far you can stray from anything remotely approaching real cat anatomy and still have a creature that looks recognizably like a cat, and it is very cute for it. Delcatty, the evolution, similarly experiments with stylization on feline shape language. Its ears take the form of a hat over its head, which looks like ears because of the triangular shapes poking out to the sides, and its long, pointy cheeks, to me, kind of imply whiskers, visually speaking. There's almost a sense of modernist abstraction to this Pokemon line, and it's a creative playfulness that I really appreciate. It feels like the designers were reaching for something here, aesthetically speaking, even if Skitty itself never really became that popular. In 1955 in Kentucky, near the cities of Kelly and Hopkinsville, a group of 12 people, 5 adults and 7 children, claimed at the police station that their farmhouse had been attacked by aliens and that they had held them off in a 4-hour gun battle until the aliens had fled. The incident became somewhat famous in alien conspiracist circles, and descriptions of the supposed aliens has made it into pop culture. Small, goblin-like with glowing eyes and pointy ears, and that, of all things, might possibly be one of the inspirations for Sableye. The other inspiration, of course, is the ruby in its chest and the sapphires in its eyes and back. It debuted in Ruby and Sapphire, but beyond its inspirations, I've always kind of liked it. It looks like a credible fae creature out of some mining culture folklore, a gremlin spirit to be respected and feared. Its monocolored body helps this idea. It looks like it could hide in the dark with those eyes glittering out of the shadows. Interestingly, for its mega form, it's only the gem in the chest that actually grows, leaving its chest with a hollow hole in the center, which is really creepy as visual imagery goes. It just pulled its own heart out of its chest, and now it's trying to beat you to death with it. That is metal. Man, who doesn't love Mawile at least a little? It might be based on a couple of different Japanese yokai that have mouths in the back of their heads or horribly split mouths, but to me, it's always evoked more of an idea of a predatory plant, almost. Maybe it's because I like Little Shop of Horrors so much. Whatever the inspiration, though, it's a classic riff on the trope of a cute face hiding a horrifying danger. Mawile looks adorable from the front and like an absolute nightmare from behind, with the Pokédex calling its giant maw an adapted horn, which... I personally really like the smirk that the mouth always has, like it's smug about having fooled its prey. It gives the design a real sense of personality. Evil personality, but still charming. Mega Mawile recognizes the strength of that base design by simply turning it up a notch. Now there's 2 mouths and the body's skirt is purple, and that's enough really, because the double mouth is genuinely twice as scary. Where normal Mawile looks scary on the level of a rattlesnake or a Venus flytrap, Mega Mawile looks scary on the level of a horror movie monster. It's very effective, would not want to run into this thing when it's hungry. Bulbapedia has it that Aron might have been inspired by the Korean Pulgasari, a legendary monster that eats iron, which, I mean, I guess, maybe? Those monsters are usually described as chimeras, though, composed of other animals, and I don't get that from Aron and its evolutions at all. Instead, Aron to me has more of a beetle vibe, if anything, or some kind of a dinosaur, although its shape language is so simple it's hard to really place it in that way. It's really just 2 diamond shapes with holes in them plus a few extra extrusions. Lyron, though, definitely has the vibe of some kind of shell-backed reptile, especially with those repeated overlaid backplates in their spines. There's a lot of attention paid to making it look hard and rigid, welded together almost, which fits its iron theming. Aggron, as the final evolution, then goes full kaiju, with lots of overlapping shapes and ridges, and a little bit of that Triceratops head. All that layering of plate does a great job of making it look armored, and the Mega form finishes the evolution by changing the rugged, rough-hewn shape language of the base form into something that's much more smooth and modern looking. It's like the difference between a World War II tank and a stealth bomber, and it makes Mega Aggron look deadly and cool as hell. Metatite is an interesting one. Going by the Pokédex, it is explicitly inspired by ascetic Yogi surviving on just 1 berry a day, and I guess maybe the head shape is meant to evoke a turban or the often tapered shape of the classic Buddha statue's head. Or maybe it's supposed to look like the crested head hair of a monkey, which would work with those large round ears and rubber hose body shape. Metatite is one of those Pokemon that skirts right up against the edge of the uncanny, nearly looking too human to be a pocket monster, but the peculiar color scheme and the odd head keeps it in the realm of the fantastical. It's much the same with Medicham, which comes very close to looking like a humanoid figure wearing a serwal, but its noodle-like appendages and stretched body shape keeps it strange and alien. It does a great job of looking agile and slippery too, with those overemphasized legs and thin body making it look almost more like a dancer than anything. Mega Medicham, with its 4 ghost arms, to me calls to mind the Vishvarupa, and the elaborate turban structure on its head and those gems now attached to its pants do a fantastic job of evoking the idea of an empowered, heightened state, either a god or perhaps the stereotypical image of a djinn. Whatever the case, I quite like it. I think its design works. When I was a kid, I kept assuming that Electrike must be electric grass type, and the reason why is really the shape of the crest on its head, which to my mind evoked a leaf structure. Combine that with the green color of the fur, and, well, there you go. Electrike, though, is a curious mix of cute puppy energy, especially with that stubby little tail pointing straight upwards, and somewhat more serious-minded angry wolf eyes and a long snout with sharp fangs. I feel like this design would have worked a little bit better if it had committed to being either cute or cool. It's kind of trying to do both. Speaking of which, I cannot take Manectric seriously. I'm sorry, it just looks like it's wearing a big silly hood, like the ones people put on their cats in viral videos. It's supposed to look regal and dignified, and I just can't buy it. And the weird chunky fur bulbs on the back leg and the angular tail that it has really doesn't help. Mega Manectric, though, thinks the better of that and angles its triangular shapes backwards to better evoke lightning and do a much better job of implying speed and sleekness. It's still a bit on the nose, it's literally just a lightning bolt with a dog attached to it, but I do feel it's more credible than its rather stuffy-looking base form. Oh look, it's the Gen 3 Pikachu clones, Red Pikachu and Blue Pikachu. I just can't see Plusle and Minun any other way than this. These are Pikachus. They have the same face, the same round cheeks, the same general body layout, the same long almond ears, and they're electric types. They are Pikachus. It's cute and a fun idea that they represent positive and negative electric charges, but literally making their tails and cheeks plus and minus symbols feels like a design cop-out to me. Like, you could have had one be happy and one be sad. You could have inverted their colors completely. You could have given them opposing shape language, where one is soft and the other one is sharp. There are more interesting ways to do this concept. Hell, Morpeko does this better in one design in Gen 8 than these guys do with 2. That said, it is also a little bit unfair to them. Pikachu is so deeply iconic and such an overpowering brand presence in Pokemon that anything that remotely looks like it inevitably loses out on the comparison. And had the OG Electric Mouse not existed, I think I might feel kinder towards these two unlucky pretenders to the throne. But that's not the world we live in, so these guys will have to suffer a D for sheer unoriginality. Volbeat is a Danish rock band formed in 2001, which got really popular around the time that I was in like 9th grade, which makes it really weird to see a Pokemon named the exact same thing that has nothing to do with it. Volbeat is half of a pair with Loomies, and they are based on fireflies. The female leads the males in a complicated dance where they light up their bottoms to draw complex shapes in the night sky. And I kind of like this pair, even if the transition to 3D really robbed them of a lot of their personality. In the artwork, their posing suggests that Loomies is sort of cheerfully assertive, while Volbeat takes on a more aloof, elegant posing, like it's a dancer waiting for its cue, and that's all lost in the 3D models, which just kind of wiggle around in their animation. Still, the base designs do retain a lot of charm. I like Volbeat's big fancy puffed up collar, there's a real sense of prideful self-regard to it, and on Illumi's, that becomes a sort of short flapper hairdo on her head that helps give her that cheerful tomboy energy. Similarly, the differences in their antennae do a good job of implying that same contrast in personality. They really do make a good pair, these two. Their designs make them feel like they were meant for each other. Roselia is a pretty little Pokemon and a fairly solid bit of design. It's based on rose bushes, and so it has a red rose and a blue rose on its arms and thorns on its head and leaves sort of in the shape of a dress along its body. It's nothing special, but it is very competent. In Gen 4, perhaps to make it a little bit more interesting, it received a full evolution line with Budgew as its starting point, and that is a cute little baby Pokemon, I will admit, with its body twisted to imitate leaves in a bud and markings under its face that resemble a baby's bib. Much like Roselia, though, it settles for just being a competent execution without having really anything else going on. Roserade, though, is when the line all of a sudden acquires a concept. Now it takes on the aspect of a dashing, mysterious Scarlet Pimpernel masquerade hero, with a fancy white haircut, a cape, and sleek down rose arms imitating ruffled sleeves. Given the romantic associations of the rose with that kind of hero, it's a really good fit, albeit none of it really connects to the rest of the evolution line. Like, there's nothing that gives me the sense that this is what Budgew or Roselia were building to, even if I must admit it ends up looking really cool once it finally gets there. What is Gulpin? Like, is it based on anything? The fan wikis posit that it might literally be based on a stomach, and given that it has some truly exceptionally disgusting and horrifying Pokedex entries, it's a plausible theory. The shape certainly supports the idea that it is literally just a stomach wobbling around on the ground. For a poison-powered digestion machine, though, it is deceptively cute with its sleepy eyes and silly kissy face, which to me feels like it's setting up some kind of horror comedy. Like, you see it rolling up to you and you're like, oh, hey, little guy, you're a cute one, and then boom, suddenly it's digesting your legs while you're still alive. Swalot is a little bit more overtly creepy with its blood-red eyes and larger, more imposing body, but it's also still silly with the kissy lips and that big golden mustache it now has. And again, I have no idea what the hell this is based on. Again, its Pokedex entries are genuinely horrible, and again, I find myself kind of unsure what to think about these creatures as designs. They are overwhelmingly simple and unique, but also almost randomly put together from shapes like a doodle someone would make while they're on the phone. I really don't know what to do with them. Carvanha is a piranha and a good example of the classic franchise design formula. Normal animal plus fantastical feature equals Pokemon. In this case, the fantastical feature is mostly the colors, and the deep shadow around the eye that intensifies its angry red glare, and it really does look kinda scary. I wouldn't want to encounter that thing in the water. Sharpedo, the evolution, is a little bit of a leap from the base form, but also just a really cool concept. Now it's a shark mixed with a torpedo, using the dark shadow around the eyes to imitate the inlet vents on a submarine vehicle or, indeed, on a torpedo. The stubby, pointy body and 4 fins does a great job of implying sleekness and underwater speed, and while it's more comical to look at than Carvanha, it still looks dangerous. The Mega form, though, I mean, it looks less like a superpower transformation and more like it got covered in hot glue and rolled across a kindergarten crafts table. It's just got a bunch of stuff stuck onto it, which doesn't make it look more powerful, it just looks less hydrodynamic and agile, which undercuts the whole point of Sharpedo in the first place. This doesn't look fast, dangerous, powerful, or scary, it really just looks silly. Whalemare is to whales as Pelipper is to pelicans. Like, it really has the same design philosophy. It caricatures the traits of a real-life animal, in this case baleen whales, and then just shapes those elements roughly into a sphere. It's a simplicity that comes with appeal. It becomes a cute little beach ball of a creature, but it escapes being just mascot cute by having pinprick eyes and a toothy whale grin, which I think is for the best. Whalelord, meanwhile, is about half the length of a blue whale, but weighs under 400 kilos, which is 0.001% of a blue whale's weight, making Whalelord less dense than air, and that really makes me worried that the physics of the Pokemon world might not be consistent with reality. Fortunately, nobody cares and that doesn't matter. Whalelord expands from the beach ball shape to a building-sized pill shape, accentuated with multiple sets of fins, which gives it just a slight air of the fantastical to me. It's almost like a blimp or an airship, which, hey, maybe the low density does make sense, actually, and that slightly odd body plan helps it both look even bigger and prevents its ultra-simple shape from making it look boring. Whalmer looks monumental, and I really like it. Numel is so goddamn cute. Real-life dromedaries are spiteful bitey bastards and kinda hideous if compelling in their weirdness, but Numel basically just ignores all of that, smoothing to the barest basics of a dromedary's body plan into a plushy, soft, adorable little friend. Its design trick of having its back look like a green top tail initially clashes with its fire type, but becomes brilliant once it evolves into Camerupt, which has 2 humps that are now active volcano peaks. The rest of the design, though, really loses the camel body plan, which is a pity. I really think it should have had long legs and a long neck, but there is some good subtle communication in the slightly angrier expression and spiky fur, giving it the vibe of, oh, it's grumpy and volatile like a volcano, and that really works for me. The mega form is unfortunately not so great. It loses all trace of a camel from its design, with its long, shaggy coat turning into much more of a yak or a muskox, which kinda sucks because camels are such compelling weird creatures, and no matter how much lava it overflows with, going from 2 volcanoes to 1 will always feel like a downgrade in power to me, and that undermines the whole point of even having a mega form. Man, Torkoal is just such a good goddamn design from such a simple, sound idea. We've talked before about how the Pokemon design formula can often be boiled down to normal animal plus fantastical feature equals Pokemon, and Torkoal is a perfect demonstration of how that formula works. What if you have a big tortoise whose shell is also a coal-fired furnace and it constantly blows smoke and steam out of its shell and nostrils? Not only does that come across as a folklore monster that I 100% believe some culture would invent, it's also just cool. Like, what a cool creature idea. It's essentially a really creative remix of the basic concept of a dragon. And so, as a design, Torkoal keeps things really simple. It really is just a stylized tortoise with a furnace in the shell. It relies entirely on its concept being so strong that it can carry the rest of the design without any decoration. It really only has a few colored bands across the neck and legs, and while some extra supporting details might have been cool on the design, honestly, it doesn't really need them. Torkoal is a perfect, cohesive concept executed flawlessly, basically from top to bottom. Aw, what an adorable little bouncing pig. Look, its tail is like a spring. How cute is that? Let me just read its adorable little Pokedex entry and... Oh no. Horrible Pokedex entry aside, Spoink is very cute, but beyond that basic trait, it's a little bit confused. It's scarcely more than a squishmallow with a pig's nose and a cute cartoon blush, and while the springtail is a fun idea, and the pearl on its head is notable, I guess, it's also unclear what it's supposed to add up to. Like, is the pearl a Bible reference? Cast not your pearls before swine? Surely not. But then what is it supposed to be? Just a psychic pearl, I guess? Like, psychic powers just come from pearls? And that confused direction continues with Grumpig, which for one thing does not look grumpy at all, but which is also kind of all over the place, with its weird gremlin ears and long curly tail and ominous black coloring and the psychic black pearls, and then also on top of that, it's a dancer, which... What's all of this supposed to add up to? It really doesn't feel like this creature was designed to be anything other than just big air quotes weird. Spinda, the Pokemon Game Freak designed specifically to drive completionists completely insane. The pattern of its spots is randomized by its personality value, and depending on how you calculate it, there might be as many as 3.9 billion possible variations of this Pokemon, so good luck catching them all, I guess. Beyond that, it's a very simple, plushy-style Pokemon, an adorable, soft little critter with some cartoon stylization to make it as appealing as possible. The gimmick, beyond the randomized spots, is that it's dizzy for whatever reason. Maybe it's spun around in a circle too many times, like you sometimes do when you're a kid. And so it's always stumbling and tottering over like a cute cartoon mascot does when they're dizzy. And that's kinda it. Like, there's really not a lot to this thing. Either you're charmed and you think it's cute, or else its wobbly, swirly-eyed gimmick gets old and you really get nothing out of it. And for me, I am more in the latter half. Frankly, Spinda doesn't really do anything for me, and beyond its silly gimmicks, it doesn't really have anything to recommend it. Hello, sorry to interrupt the compilation, but I figure if you've stuck around this long, you might be willing to stomach sitting through a little bit of self-promotion from me. If you want to support the work that I do, then you can kick me a tip on Ko-fi, sign up for a subscription on Patreon, or become a member of this channel. There are rewards available for all of these things. Becoming a channel member gives you early access to the shorts and compilations, for example, and I would very much appreciate the support. A $1 direct donation can easily be the same as 1,000 monetized views, so it makes much more of a difference than you might think. That being said, though, please remember that I don't want any money that you need for yourself, including like your pizza money or your new video game money. If you have $1 that you don't mind parting with, I'd be grateful to receive it, but take care of yourself first. Besides that, you can support the channel by sharing the videos, or if you're interested, you can check out the video essays over on my main channel, or subscribe to my Let's Play channel, or my reaction channel. And no, I don't have a problem. I can stop making new channels anytime I like, thank you very much. There's good stuff on them though, so please do check them out. Alright, self-promotion over, back to the compilation. Trapinch is another great example of how Pokemon's design philosophy makes bugs cute and appealing, because real-life antlion larvae look freaking horrifying, frankly. But Trapinch, with its big gregarious head, sawtooth smile, and literal starry-eyed expression, just comes across as a friendly, cheerful, and optimistic cute little overexcited puppy, or a child going to Disneyland tomorrow. Vibrava, on the other hand, suffers a little bit from middle evolution syndrome, being a stopping point between two more interesting ideas. It just sort of comes across as a variation of Yanma with weirdly geometric wings, and I find it entirely forgettable. Flygon has some fun ideas, though. Its long, sleek body, along with those geometric sharp wing blades and the goggle-like eyes, to me implies some sort of stunt pilot or flying ace. There's a real sense of agility and aerodynamic speed to it. It's a really cool design, and I've always liked Flygon, but I do have to say it doesn't really feel like a meaningful capstone to the ideas present in its evolution line. It loses too many bug traits to look like an adult antlion, and I wish it had carried something over from Trapinch, even if only a sawtoothed grin or its starry eyes. It's a cool Pokemon, but a shaky evolution line. Cacnea is such a good little Pokemon design. Despite being based on a cactus, it doesn't actually have that many spikes on its design, making up the difference instead with diamond-shaped patterns on the body. Its jack-o'-lantern grin made of holes and bright eyes strike just the right balance between weird and cute, like imagine how creepy it would be with pure black eye sockets, and the round proportions also keep it adorable and appealing. It's all capped off with a flower crown that gives it a cheerful energy like a prince or princess from a fairy tale, and I really like it. Cacturn, on the other hand, oh man, what happened to you? The best I can make out is that it's supposed to be a cactus scarecrow, which, okay, I guess, but what a nothing burger of a design. The body is on the one hand big and round and soft like a guy in a mascot costume, and then on the other hand it's supposed to be spiky and unpleasant and kinda scary, and those things just do not gel at all. It looks like a design where they forgot to come up with ideas for any part of the Pokemon below the neck, and I just don't think it works. This Pokemon's evolution is a straight up downgrade. You know, I've never really thought that much about it, but Swablu is really cute. Like, look at this perfect little burb. It's really the split feathers on its head that do it. They make it look slightly goofy in a way that feels authentic to the way that birds are often goofy, and hey, a bird with clouds for wings, that is fun imagery. Altaria continues that idea, replacing the round puffball bird shape with a body that has some sense of grace, especially in those long, flowing head feathers that add a sense of billowing wind to its design. I do feel like it looks better in the 2D art, though, where the cloud it sits in is a big round fluff ball rather than the slightly awkward affectation of wings it tries to do in the 3D form. This Pokemon feels more like it should float around serenely than flap its wings to get around. I do love the puffy little cheeks and small face on this guy though. It might be a dragon, but it is the opposite of intimidating, visually speaking. Mega Altaria tries to really ramp up the cloud forms around the body, and unfortunately I think it just ends up looking like it's covered in shaving foam. Like, those clouds should actually be shaped like clouds, and they just aren't. The hat on its head is a cute touch though, and the long tail is a great way to make it visually look powerful, but yeah, no, I just see shaving foam. Ah, the David Bowie Pokemon. Or, well, not really, it only looks vaguely like Ziggy Stardust, but for some reason, that's always the first thing that comes up for me when I look at it. Another thing that comes up in my head with Zangoose for some reason is Digimon. It might be something about the very humanoid two-legged construction, or the unmotivated jagged fur pattern and the claw hands. I don't really know, but I just can't get away from it. Whatever Zangoose does look like, though, it doesn't look like a mongoose, which is a slight problem for the design, actually, since its dual partnership with Seviper is actually supposed to have it look like an actual mongoose, and I just don't really get that from the design here. Putting that aside though, Zangoose is pretty cool. Like, this is absolutely the kind of Pokemon I would have fixated on as a kid, just because it has a bit of that edgy anime anti-hero vibe. Like, it's supposed to be the Sasuke to someone's Naruto or the Shadow to someone's Sonic, and it really comes down to the aggressive red and white contrast to the deliberate asymmetry in its features, and those deadly looking black claws. They look like they're perfect for teleporting behind someone and saying, "Heh, nothing personal, kid." Oh look, it's pretentious Eckhands! Seviper is one of those specifically designed to be a version-exclusive Pokemon, and exists basically entirely to complete a rival duality with Zangoose, based on the real-life predator-prey relationship between mongooses and certain species of snake. And much like Zangoose, Seviper is designed to look non-specifically cool, with its black and gold patterning, its oversized saber-tooth fangs and blade tail, which, while a little much, maybe, would absolutely have appealed to me when I was a kid, so I can't say it's a bad design. Between Zangoose and Seviper, Seviper has by far the more charm, with its permanent mischievous smile and those upturned eyes, giving it the permanent aspect of someone who's just put a whoopee cushion on your chair. It's kind of fun. And I like its wavy noodle body too. That's a nice and visually distinct way to present a snake, and a good way to set it apart from Eckhands, even if in my opinion, it will never escape looking like it's a rejected first draft of Arbok. Another classic set of version-exclusive TM Pokemon designs. Like Seviper and Zangoose, Lunatone and Solrock are contrasting opposite designs, which exist basically entirely to be version-exclusive counterparts to one another that will encourage kids to trade and battle these specific pairs against each other. Which may have worked at the time, I wouldn't know, I never traded much as a kid, but the downside of these designs is that they lack any sense of purpose beyond that particular gimmick. Lunatone is literally just a crescent moon with a beak, I guess, and Solrock is a rock which is shaped like a sun, and that's kind of it. There's really nothing to either of them except that they are one another's opposites. Lunatone has big open eyes on the side of its head, Solrock has squinting eyes in the front, Lunatone is rounded, smooth and curved, Solrock is jagged, rough and spiky, etc. And I will say that, yeah, that works, I guess, in that sense. There's not really anything I could think of to improve them as such, it's just that even if their designs are near perfect for their purpose is pretty shallow, and their designs are consequently about as interesting as a pair of emojis. The beauty of Pokemon as a franchise is that every Pokemon is someone's favorite. I don't know anyone whose favorite is Barboach, but I fully believe that they exist, because it is, in its quiet little way, kind of a charming little critter. It is extremely believable as a fish. Like, you could convince me that this thing exists in nature in a slightly less cartoony form, and with its pinprick eyes and permanently surprised mouth, yeah, it is cute in a weird and slightly alien sort of way. Whiscash, on the other hand, is a decidedly more cartoony affair, with its big round eyes and big goofy grin, but with its long whiskers, it's also a very effective catfish design, stylizing the weirdness of those fish into something that's appealing and fun. My only real criticism is that its color scheme, dark blue with yellow accents, keeps making me feel like it ought to be an electric type, which it most definitely isn't. Still, this is the kind of Pokemon that, if it were more popular, would actually make for some killer plushies. I could be convinced to buy a beanbag chair shaped like this guy. Those friendly round shapes that it's made of just look really inviting for that purpose. Corphish is another Pokemon that's only barely not just a regular animal, and my biggest criticism is that it really is missing that usual fantastical element that makes a Pokemon design compelling and interesting. This is just a highly stylized crawfish. The charm that it has, though, comes entirely from those tiny little arms. Its claws are basically glued to the side of its head, which gives it a permanently befuddled energy, like even it is confused by why it looks this way. And that is something, I admit. It is a cheerful little Pokemon to look at, even if I find it a little bit boring. Crawdaunt, with the golden star in its head and the shell shape on the front that looks like an open shark's mouth, makes up for the foibles of its base evolution, making a really nice and distinctive lobster monster design now, with its functional claws and decision to give it what almost looks like dinosaur legs instead of crustacean legs. It strikes a good balance between still looking goofy and friendly and genuinely looking a little bit intimidating. I get kind of the vibe of a 16-bit era RPG boss from it, like it has an instant kill move that's called Claw Crush or something, and that's a good thing. It makes it charming and rather memorable. I really like Baltoy and Claydol as concepts and designs. They seem to be based on various forms of ancient pottery, and that's just a killer concept for a Pokemon. Instinctively, I kinda want it to be Ghost-type to represent the spirit of a dead civilization, but Ground Psychic does make sense as well. Baltoy, with its slightly humanoid shape almost resembling something like a toy, is a great starting point for the evolution line. It's uncanny and a little bit strange, but also compelling. Like, if I had a fidget toy that looked like this, I would spin it all the time. It feels like an object that is meant to be handled somehow. It feels friendly. Claydol, on the other hand, with its circular ring of eyes and bulbous body, all of a sudden veers hard into "be not afraid" territory, evoking something uncanny and weird, like it was made by the hands of people whose concept of beauty is alien to our modern sensibilities, like it's an altarpiece to the shrine of some long-forgotten god. The black primary color with red eyes and white accents makes it genuinely striking. I don't know that this Pokemon line is popular, but I have never forgotten it. So I really quite like Lileep as a fossil Pokemon because, yeah, sure, fossils of animals are cool and all, but fossilized plants are a way underexplored source of interesting visual ideas. Lileep, with its mouth and darkened face and tongue-like appendages standing on that chunky foot, looks just a bit alien in the way that extinct life often does to our eyes. It looks like something that populated ancient seas, or an enemy that Samus Aran needs to blast apart in a Metroid game. It's creepy and a bit weird, and I really like that. Cradilly is a good evolution of that, ramping up the danger factor by introducing that bitey sort of looking mouth shape, taking on a slightly animal-like aspect, but with the petals around its head still recognizably keeping it a plant. Much like Lileep, I adore how odd and peculiar this Pokemon is allowed to be, never succumbing to the temptation to become either cute or anime badass the way that so many other Pokemon do. Here, I think that kind of change would be a big downgrade. Man, Anorith is such a good fossil Pokemon. It's based on the Anomalocaris, which is a genus of extinct and wonderfully weird-looking arthropods, some of the ancestors of modern shrimp. That's where it gets the long two claws on the front of its face, as well as the fanning wings along the side of its body. Anorith parses the weirdness of its origin really well through the stylizing filter of the Pokemon style, making the critter cute by giving it big eyes and avoiding too much of the bug-like weirdness by smoothing out the shapes of the body into a larger, more appealing shape like the big flat oval of its body. The evolution Armaldo, though, I mean, it just kind of becomes a kaiju. All its original cuteness and weirdness is quite awkwardly adapted into a form that a suit actor could plausibly occupy, with dinosaur-esque legs and a Godzilla body plan, and it just loses the magic for me. Like, yeah, it's cooler and more powerful and whatever, but that's not really what I came to this evolution line for. I came here for the weird alien shrimp creature. I didn't want a B-movie. Okay, so Phoebus is ugly, and that's kind of the main thing about it. It has patchy brown skin, big floppy fish lips, pinprick eyes, and a big black void, and weird frayed and perforated fins colored blue, which is a color that does not go naturally very well with the dishwater brown of the rest of its body. And that ugliness is, of course, the point, because Phoebus is also a gimmick Pokemon meant to introduce the beautiful mechanic for the Pokemon contests. If you raise this pointless stat high enough, boom, here comes a vision of grace and loveliness that goes by the name of Milotic. And Milotic is very pretty, with its long, slender body, striking colors, and heart-shaped eyebrows, and long, flowing hair, for lack of a better word. It looks like a Pokemon that has a skincare routine. It looks like it could be a beauty influencer. And while I don't know that I find its design entirely cohesive, soft salmon pink to me doesn't really necessarily go with powder blue and black webbing, it is definitely striking, which matters a lot for what it's trying to do. This is Generation 3's take on Magikarp, a big moment of hype and amazement for anyone who goes through the grind. And I do respect it, even if the majority of the impact kind of wears off once you know the gimmick. When I was looking into cast form, I learned about the Teru Bozu, a kind of paper doll that people in Japan sometimes make, which is said to influence the weather. And first of all, these are adorable, I want to hang them in my window, and second, yeah, that's definitely what cast form is. And thank God it is, because to me, between the ball sack under its chin and the gray color and the wiggly tail on its head, I couldn't help but connect it with something that is decidedly less family-friendly. Cast form is primarily a gimmick Pokemon. It's designed to interact with Gen 3's weather mechanics, and it's designed basically to be a mascot for those. It puts on a cute little costume to match whatever weather conditions happen to be present, like it's a twee little graphic on the evening weather report, warning of high UV indexes or gusts of wind. It's all very cute, but ultimately the design has very little to say beyond its initial gimmick, and thus I just can't get myself to find it particularly interesting. Still want a Teru Bozu though, those things are cute. Man, Kecleon is such a great little Pokemon design. It's a chameleon, extremely obviously, but a beautifully stylized one of the kind. It draws on the abstract-looking patterning and curly tails of real chameleons, but sleeks down the body plan and lets it walk on two legs with little clawed hands instead of the two-fingered, spindly twig legs that real chameleons have. The humanoid body plan imbues Kecleon with a sense of humanoid intelligence, and the big head on the tiny body gives it a little bit of that childlike charm, but with its big flat mouth and circle eyes, it never looks too human or too cute. It retains an animal spirit, bumping up against the qualities of a mascot without ever really tipping over into that cutesy territory. And I don't really know what to say about it beyond that, really. It's just a really competent design making good choices about how to stylize the animal that it's based on, which puts it pretty high on my tier list, although your mileage may vary. Shuppet is about as basic as a ghost design can possibly get, being literally a floating sheet with eyes on it. Still though, I think it's quite effective thanks to the striking blue and yellow eyes, sharp and almond-shaped and ringed with black. Like, that does look like something that will be genuinely scary to see floating out at you in a dark hallway. The horn on its head also almost looks like it's being held up by some invisible hand, like a deep sea fish dangling a lure, which, oh, that is kinda creepy. Banette takes it to another level though, with its strangely hooded eyes and slit pupils and that zipper mouth. It looks almost like something evil that has been stuffed into into a sock or bag of some kind and sealed in there. Mega Banette, in turn, looks like something evil breaking out of the container that it's been sealed in. The zippered hands look like mouths, extending searching tongues for victims, and the new zipper, cutting diagonally across its head, invites the terrifying thought of what might emerge should that come undone. Combine that with the Pokédex noting that Banette is a doll seething with hatred at being discarded by a child, perpetually hunting for its former owner, and this thing is genuinely the stuff of children's nightmares. It's a very good ghost. Another member of the This Pokemon Murders Children Club, Duskull is a peculiar little spook blob. It's a very basic design, grey formless shape, a skull because it's dead and a glowing red eye because spooky, and it looks like a generic ghost enemy in any of 100 Game Boy titles. And while it is sort of oddly charming, it really doesn't feel very interesting to me. And Dusclops kinda has the same problem. It ditches the skull to go for a mummy vibe, now with a single cyclopean staring red eye, which granted, that's a bit creepy, but its design otherwise just feels rather directionless. The big chunky teeth especially look rather goofy, and while it does have a yokai sort of charm to it, I just find it difficult to read any intention in the design. Dusk Noir goes off in a completely new direction after that, sleeking the design into a stylized coolness that reminds me of a Kingdom Hearts Heartless enemy. In this form, it's apparently a psychopomp ferrying spirits to the afterlife, which, okay, sure, I can see that. And while the yellow banding looks maybe a little bit too toy-like on its arms, it does have a certain imposing presence here, albeit it got that by completely abandoning the feeling and aesthetic of all its previous evolutions, and so the line ends up feeling kinda disjointed. Tropius feels a lot like Game Freak took a second look at Meganium and were like, "Aw man, we should have made that way cooler." It's another Pokemon that got badly screwed over by the decision to make all of the flying type models be permanently in the air, because it really kinda needs to be grounded and standing proud to show off its majestic sauropod vibes with those giant leaf wings. In its flying pose, it just ends up looking kinda goofy. Tropius is actually a really cool looking Pokemon. The banana-like fruits act almost like a beard or a mane, its leaf cloak gives it a sense of being mantled in some kind of formal garment, and those giant leaf wings that it has constantly frame it like it's carrying around its own dramatic backdrop. There's real imperious dignity to this thing, although it does depend a little bit on how the helmet is framed in camera. From the side or in profile it looks cool, straight on it looks a little bit like its head is being squeezed out of a tube. It's probably meant to be a flight helmet of some sort, but I don't know 100% if it works with the rest of the design. Still, this should have been Chikorita's final form, and you cannot change my mind. Chingling and Chimecho are both based on bells and wind chimes used in Shinto shrines, and maybe that's why I keep expecting them to be ghost types. Like, instinctively, they read to me like objects possessed by some kind of a spirit, but no, they're mod-type psychic, which, okay, given the role that bells and chimes can play in meditation, I guess that kinda makes sense. Outside of that, though, I feel like there's not that much to say about the designs as such. Chimecho is literally just a wind chime with a face on it. It's cute, but not exactly interesting. Chingling is a little bit clever, using the structure of the bell itself to make a happy little mouth with big round cheeks that also displays the ball bearing inside that makes it make noise. And the ribbon that's attached to it does do double duty as floppy ears or pigtails, which gives it a real precocious child energy, which is good for a baby Pokemon, I suppose. But once all of that is said, I mean, they're cute, they're reasonably effective designs, and I guess for that, they're probably okay, even if they do end up stuck in the object with a face painted on it category of Pokemon design, which I'm not a huge fan of. Absol is an interesting one. Bulbapedia has it that it's based on a Chinese monster called the Baize, which I don't know enough to really speak on. It certainly has the feeling of something strange and mystical. Its hair is shaped like a Magatama and forms a contrasting opposite shape with that single deadly scythe horn, as well as forming a black and white duality that for me brings to mind the concept of yin and yang. The sharp shape language of its tail and horn, those deadly looking claws, and that big, almost leonine mane gives it a sense of power and danger. The uncanny human-like face on an animal's body brings to mind Sphinxes and Lamashu, and that works really well with what the Pokédex says about it being able to predict disasters and divine the future. It's a weird design, but that does seem to be the idea. Seeing an Absol should be unsettling. Mega Absol then cues the music and goes all Sephiroth on us with angel wings and a new horn emerging from the other side of its head, and even more powerful looking claws, giving it the look of an angel with devil horns. It's cool, but I kind of mourn the loss of that peculiar asymmetry that defines the base design. In becoming more symmetrical, it becomes more comprehensible, less an ominous omen and more just an ordinary cool creature. Snorunt is a really efficient design. It's effectively just a triangle with feet, but with its two little hands crossed over and pulling at its coat, pinprick blue eyes, and permanently chattering teeth, has there ever been a design that more perfectly communicates the concept of being cold? I feel chilly just looking at it. Glael, though, abandons all sense of cuteness and becomes genuinely kind of fucking scary to look at, with its pitch black body covered in bone-like webs of ice. It looks like the vengeful spirit of a rock slide in winter, and the mega form takes it up even harder with that gaping, consuming mouth, razor-sharp ice horns, and a head which now looks fully like a death's head skull. Wingull. It goes pretty hard. If you give Snorunt HRT, a Dawnstone instead, you get Frostlass, which has a much gentler shape language and seems to be wearing a robe. Cleverly though, that's all just attachments hanging from her floating head, making her a great ghost character. That head still has a little bit of that skull-like white cover, but arranged much more smoothly, giving an illusion of innocence, which according to the Pokédex, it uses to ensnare and freeze its human victims, which it then consumes. She's not as obviously a vision of death as Glail is, but the deception is quite effective design. We all understand that you can't be friends with someone who doesn't like Spheal, right? Like, we all know that that's the rule. It is an obscenely adorable little beach ball of a critter with its hamster eyes and cheerful little tusks, and frankly, it is perfect. 10 out of 10, absolutely no notes. Leo then starts cosplaying Dr. Robotnik on his off time, I guess, which is mostly fine because it maintains the fundamental charm of Spheal, round, soft, and friend-shaped with a nice cheerful color scheme. Walrein, though, look, on the one hand, yes, it does look like an effective, heightened version of a bull walrus. Yes, the head and the mustache looks like a breaking wave, and that's cool, and the ridges on the neck gives it a look of leathery toughness, and that's cool, and the now intimidating intense yellow stare and the long tusks, yeah, technically this is a good design for a walrus Pokemon. Technically, it might even be a great design. But look how they massacred my boy, look what they did to him! What happened to my precious child? Was his soft perfection corrupted by the violence of endless Pokemon battles? How could we have failed you so that you would become this? Clamperl, now there's an evolution line. Clamperl itself is literally just a clam, there's not a lot to say there. It's a clam with a cute little sleeping core, surrounded by bulbs that seem like they're growing into more pearls. Once it evolves though, oh boy! Huntail is, hideous? Yeah, hideous. It looks absolutely horrible, but in a cheerful and goofy way that feels very intentional. Being based on deep-sea gulper eels and the like, it's an appropriate way to design it, with especially that silly pompadour fin on its head, giving it a lot of gregarious charm. It's a very happy little monstrosity. Gorbis, the other evolution, is much prettier, but with the clamshell bra and lash extensions and bright pink color, it too has kind of a silly vibe about it. Like, it is as much a tongue-in-cheek parody of stereotypical high femininity as Huntail is a parody of brash masculinity. Interestingly, Huntail's tail looks like the head of Gorbis, and Gorbis' tail resembles the roundness of Huntail's head, the implication being, I suppose, that these are two ends of the same spectrum, which, as a design, is genuinely kinda clever. I don't know if I like any of these Pokemon very much, I wouldn't use them, but I can't say that they're not memorable. Relicanth is a coelacanth, like just kinda straight up. Specifically, its coloration seems to be based on the Indonesian coelacanth, and that's kind of it about this Pokemon, really. It's a very basic stylization of essentially a real animal, with the primary fantastical feature that's supposed to turn it into a Pokemon being that red jewel spot on its side, I guess. The pattern on its body kind of brings to mind the idea of a map, although I don't think it matches any map on the Pokemon world that I have ever seen. The only other thing it's really got going on is that smooth, rock-like head, which, along with its mumbling mouth, does give it kind of a slightly senile old man energy. Like, this is a Pokemon that's set in its ways and just going about its business, and all you young Poke people with your Pokemon Go apps, well, back in my day, we learned the names of all 151 Pokemon by heart by listening to the Poke Rap. Kids these days, oh, they don't know how good they got it. And I do like the sleepy energy it has, how unbothered it seems, just swimming in the deep sea and ignoring the world above. Kind of wish that I could do that sometimes. A lot of times. Okay, why is Love Disc? Like, why is it? Why is it here? What's the point of it? As far as I can tell, it's basically there to be a source of heart scales for the move reminder, and other than that and being sort of vaguely, slightly disturbingly cute, that kind of seems to be it, which, okay, fair enough, I guess you gotta get those scales from somewhere, and it's a pretty funny joke to play on the players to make them catch dozens of these useless things just to optimize a move set or two. And given that the Pokédex notes that the poor things were overfished to the point of near extinction by people trying to get their scales for love charms, it's kind of a dark joke too. Outside of that, though, Love Disc is a kissing fish, basically, and about as simple as a kissing fish can be. It's a swimming heart with big round eyes, a cheek circle, and a wobbly little kissy mouth. It's an avatar of cutesy romance, it's an accessory more than an actual creature. And maybe that's fine, actually. I think probably the game needs at least a few Pokemon like that. The mandatory pseudo-legendary stick it out to level 50 and you get a dragon Pokemon. And Bagon is an okay little critter, I suppose. Most of its interest comes from that slicked-back iron crest on its head, which is very distinctive, and that little fang in the corner of its mouth gives it a sort of bulldog, puppy dog gregariousness, although I really feel like it needs a tail on its body to balance out the proportions properly. Shelgon, meanwhile, turns the iron crest into an eggshell, which is a really solid look for a second stage that's waiting to hatch into something epic. It's basically copying what bug Pokemon do, and the angry little face window right in the middle of it is just, at least to me, adorable. And then there's Salamence, and I have just never been impressed with this thing. It is a dragon, but its body plan is squashed like a deflated football, and its crescent wings are just sort of silly looking. They are way too small to convincingly carry its body around, and it looks comedic rather than cool. Mega Salamence almost makes up for everything by being one of the coolest and most striking designs in the game. That half-moon wing shape is equal parts fighter jet and mythical moon beast streaking across the sky. It rules, if only it didn't look so clunky in 3D. The Beldum line is genuinely really cool. Beldum itself is just sort of odd, almost like a flying security camera. It looks unique, but also incomplete, like it's only half of an idea. Which it is, because when two of them fuse together, they form Metang, which has two Beldum for its arms. With its flying saucer body shape and spike nose and mutton chops like claws on the side, Metang has always looked uncannily to me like it was built by Dr. Robotnik. In this form, it's clearly more complete, but it also looks just innocent enough to seem a little bit harmless. Until Metagross comes along with that big aggressive X on the face and the angry eyes and the spider body plan with the 4 claws, it ramps up the menace and the aggression and becomes something that's genuinely kind of scary to look at. If I have a criticism, it's that I don't think it looks steel-type enough in its design. It looks craggy, like rock rather than metal, but it is undeniably both striking and very powerful looking. Mega Metagross then layers the customary Super Sentai villain filter over top of all of that, adding yet another 4 arms, bringing back the face spike, turning the X gold, and floating menacingly like it's about to JoJo combo someone to death. It's a bit much. It loses the quiet menace of Metagross, but it is appropriate for a Mega form. Ah, the Reggies. My body is ready. Regirock is probably the most basic of the original trio, at least from the perspective that Reggies are based on the golem of Hebrew myth, so one of them being made of essentially earth also comes across as essentially the most default, as it were, the closest to the inspiration. The clever thing that the entire Reggie line does, of course, is using Braille on their heads to represent the writing on the forehead that is key to the mythological golem. That's a really clever thing to do, and having 7 dotted eyes also makes it a little bit alien and strange in a way that big round anime eyes simply couldn't achieve. Besides that, it is a little bit basic as a design. It's just a humanoid shape made out of rocks like any of 100 fantasy golems, but what I do appreciate about it is the chaotic look of the many carved surfaces on the planes of its body. It looks rough-hewn, yes, but it doesn't look like it just randomly broke free of any given mountainside. There's a sense that it was carved. It's a similar look to the regular surface patterns on ancient flint tools, and it also shares with such tools the tendency for variegated coloration, patches of ruddy red and brown on its warm gray base color palette. That's all very cool, and even if it's not very exciting, I really like it. Regice is the second of the legendary giants, and maybe one of the weaker designs in the group. It shares the golem inspiration with the rest of the Reggie line, including the clever bits like Braille writing on the head to signify the writing on the mythological golem. And it does have the sense of being constructed in the same way that Regirock has. Like, it very much looks like a thing which was put together, like a child might put together a toy, and that comports nicely with the connection to Regigas, which, did create it. Outside of that, though, I'm just not really feeling the ice typing here. Like, the idea is that it's a bunch of ice crystals stuck together, which, okay, fine. But, ice has so many interesting fractal patterned shapes, and this is just a series of vaguely diamond-shaped prisms stuck together with crazy glue. It ends up just looking like glass. It doesn't really look elemental to me. It doesn't look like it's made of ice so much as it looks like it's made out of what someone who's only ever seen ice in comic books might think that ice looks like. And yeah, obviously Regice isn't alone in that. A lot of ice Pokemon have these stylized ice crystals on them, but here especially, I just don't think it's very good. I just don't think it's interesting. Registeel is by far the most interesting of the original 3 legendary giants. Like the others, it has the Braille writing on the head connecting it to the Hebrew myth of the golem, and that remains clever. But Registeel arranges its eyes in a pattern reminiscent of compound insect eyes or camera lenses, like splinter cell goggles almost, all of which works together with its construction to give a sense of something altogether more robotic than its siblings. It has a grey metal shell over this smooth black body, like an astronaut in a spacesuit, and between that and the long smooth arms with humanoid fingers, I almost inevitably end up reading it as far more alien science fiction like. And I think where Metagross with its craggy body ended up looking too rocky to be metallic, Registeel could never be anything other than metal, with its regularly segmented, smooth and shiny surfaced and clearly constructed body. There's nothing animalistic, natural, or biological here. This thing was forged. It all contributes to a design that is at once very striking and quite unique, but if I were to critique it, it's maybe a little bit too alien from its siblings, a little bit too different. By the time Regieleki and Regidraco come around, that's a moot criticism, of course, but we're still on Gen 3, so for now I'm counting it. Latias and Latios, I've never really liked them very much. They're a legendary duo based on, I guess, jet planes and maybe some birds. They certainly have the look of an airline mascot, and that is not a compliment. They form a gender duo, with Latios rendered a little bit sharper, with sharper eyes, sharper angles, and a slightly bulkier body, because of course male equals aggression, while Latias, with her soft red color, bigger round eyes, and smaller gentle hands, and more curved and slender body, is the feminine aspect, and yeah. I'm not opposed to sexual dimorphism in Pokemon, it can be very fun, but there are times it just tumbles into tedious stereotype. Like, this is on par with Disney Channel making a pink Stitch to be his girlfriend. It's so basic. If these Pokemon are based in part on birds have all kinds of cool and interesting sexual dimorphism to get inspired by. Give Latios a big peacock tail or something. Be creative. The Mega Form sort of gets rid of this problem by making them both completely identical, which, yeah, gets rid of the boring gender stereotype, but then also why even have two of them? Still, I do see the idea that this represents a fused unity of the two forms, a reconciliation of their opposing qualities, and I can't say that I dislike a Pokemon design that inherently says that being non-binary gives you superpowers. Like any sensible person, I'm obviously 100% Team Kyogre. Let the seas swallow the land and return our bodies to the embrace of the Universal Mother. And I really do like Kyogre a lot. It's an amazing ocean-themed legendary. Its main body is that of an orca, complete with false eye markings, but a dual fin arrangement that gives it a sense of being capable of real speed underwater. The long flowing tail fins, almost like a goldfish, adds a sense of elegance and grace, while the long wings with its fingers, at least for me, brings to mind both manta rays and something just a little bit human. Human enough at least to be intelligent. And it's all aided by those badass blood red markings whose symmetry implies some kind of sacred geometry or ritual purpose. It just rules. It's such a good goddamn design, even if, like many Pokemon, the 3D model kinda lets it down. Primal Kyogre turns all of its qualities up a notch, fluorescing the body with red, blue, and that divine golden glow coming from the inside as though its very bones are shining through its physical form with power. It is at once ghost-like and alien, but in the way that a deep-sea jellyfish is ghost-like and alien. It's a fantastic remix of the base design, and I love it so much. Oh look, it's yet another Pokemon that looks like a typical kaiju. Wow, what an innovation. It's a mix of a reptile and a dragon that stands on two legs. Wow. But okay, snark aside, while I am Team Kyogre, it's not like Groudon is a terrible design. Its flat body shape and head crest, along with those burrowing claws, makes us in a little bit of sense of pangolins and moles into a dinosaur dragon design, and that's a great fit for its theming. The regular geometric shapes carved into its carapace are also excellent and do a lot of work to elevate it from merely being a creature to being something that seems legendary, and with all the sharp aggressive spikes, claws, and that intense stare from the darkness under its crest, it looks powerful and it looks dangerous. Primal Groudon is where the design really starts to work though, replacing the dark gaps in the armor with a golden glow like magma ready to burst out of the earth, and darkening the claws and body to look like obsidian. This Pokemon looks not only legendary but almost divine, like the embodiment of a volcanic eruption. Even if I don't think it's remotely a match for Primal Kyogre in terms of creativity, I'm not going to pretend like it's not cool. Still, the sea is superior and the land will yield. Is it just me or does Rayquaza always look like it's pogging? Like, someone pointed that out to me once and now I can never unsee it again. Anyway, I'm not 100% sure what to make of Rayquaza really. It's a classic Asian-style dragon, obviously, with a serpentine body and arms, but those arms are also really dinky, like these tiny little weak-looking twigs. The body is long and supple and twisting, but also segmented like metal, and those segments are broken up by fins that look like nothing so much as ailerons on a plane, or, given the look of the tail and the fins on its head, perhaps more like a missile. And don't get me wrong, a missile is a cool thing for a Pokemon to be inspired by, but there's just this overall sense of sleek modernity to Rayquaza, which I just don't think fits its role as this 100-million-year-old ancient guardian of the skies. It looks too modern for that, too plastic and metal and created. It lacks that sense of divine power, especially compared to Kyogre. Mega Rayquaza fortunately makes up for a lot of that, with its badass new head and the trailing energy ribbons and flowing tail feathers. Here, the divinity manifests itself and looks genuinely kinda epic, to the point that I kinda think this should be the base form, if I'm honest. Like, this just looks way better on every metric. Ah, Jirachi now, there's a peculiar little gimmick. It is literally the personification of a wishing star, being star-shaped, flying around with a trail like a shooting star or a comet, and as I understand it, the tags on its head are representative of paper strips upon which people will write wishes to come true during a particular Japanese star festival. As a result, this is very much a mascot Pokemon, interested in being cute and appealing and adorable, and not so much in being any kind of a unique or interesting creature. It's a little humanoid blob with big round eyes, a chibi body, and a cute hat, and while it is undeniably adorable, it's also just not much of a Pokemon to me. Like, the Pokemon design style is very diverse, but this looks like it could be the logo for any of 100 businesses or candy brands. I do wish there was something more to it than just that blank white body. Like, surely there's some kind of wish-fulfilling animal or cryptid that you could have based this on, but that's all missing the point a little bit, I guess. It's cute, it's a shooting star, it grants wishes, and it isn't really meant to be anything more than an event-exclusive bonus and the subject of, like, one of the million billion Pokemon movies. Deoxys is a fucking weirdo, and I think I kind of love it for that. It's an alien virus that got mutated somehow, and then became a Pokemon somehow, and to that end, its design revolves around the double helix shape of DNA on the one hand, and a robotic sci-fi metal sleekness meant to communicate its outer space alienness on the other. And it does succeed at that, I guess. Each of its forms look alien and uncanny and weird, aided a lot by its floppy noodle arms, and they are all in their own way genuinely quite striking. The defense form bulks up, looking like it's wearing an armored spacesuit and has chunkier arms, while the speed form slims down and sheds most of its exoskeleton to look agile, and that all works. The attack form could look more lethal and aggressive, I think. Like, it's got a few spikes and looks a little bit sharper, sure, but there just isn't enough there to definitively distinguish it from the base form. I think they look a little bit too similar. I gotta say, I think there's probably more interesting ideas that you could work out with a Pokemon based on the idea of a virus, and Deoxys feels a little bit disconnected from the themes and ideas of Gen 3 as a whole, but I'm not gonna lie, when I was a kid I thought this thing was a fucking badass, and I was so sad that I never got a chance to get one. And that's Gen 3 over with. Well, that was faster than I thought. I never really got to play Ruby and Sapphire as a kid. I grew up playing Red and Blue, but I never got a Game Boy Advance, so I only discovered Gen 3 through emulation much later on down the line. Consequently, I have a lot less nostalgia for this generation than I do for Gen 1 or 2, and overall, I think Gen 3 is a little bit mid in terms of Pokemon designs. It's partly because they were all designed for 2D sprites and the 3D conversion of them kinda sucks, but that's what the Pokemon franchise has transitioned to, so it is what it is. Gen 4 is next on the menu, and that's another generation I never played as a kid. I did have a DS, but I didn't get back into Pokemon until Black and White, so I wonder what I'll think of those designs once I try to review them more closely. I also wonder which design I'm gonna end up not liking, and that one turns out to be half the fandom's perfect favorite. People got really mad about the Trico short. Like, I got some really nasty comments, but I probably should have known that any starter is gonna be a lot of people's favorite. Anyway, I've already done the self-promotion, so I won't bother you with it here. Thank you for your time and your attention. Remember to be kind to one another, have solidarity with those who are struggling, and may the tides of history wash gently over us all.